Hey, I thought I'd chew on your ear, but very briefly regarding a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I'm not sure if it's near and dear to yours, but I believe it's of such great import that it would be ingenuine of me not to speak of it. But one of the reasons we do meditate is to, well, break up illusions, break up the delusion of particular patterns of thinking or perception that are limiting. They restrict our capacity to live to our fullest expression. So it's a beautiful thing that meditation does this slowly and surely over a long period of time, but it just takes delusionary, inaccurate, ignorant thinking and dissolves it, and it reveals truth. I believe this with all of my heart. It's not just my opinion. It seems to be the consensus of every spiritual teacher and every spiritual system in the history of mankind, that by quieting the turbulence of our own individual minds, a greater source of wisdom and insight is actually made available to us. And it's an important thing to pin your belief system on, that by quieting our own individual mind, that a larger wisdom is made available to us. Is this conclusively proven? Not in the world per se. There's really two ways of looking at the brain in the modern world. And in truth, the modern world looks at the brain, probably 98% of the consensus is the following, and it's called the generative principle or concept of what the brain does. The brain is a mass of material, obviously, that has biological and electrical currents running through it. And as a result of that, it squirts out consciousness. What's going on in the meat of our brain, locked inside of our cranium, on a head that's attached to our body, that's in a physical world. Our brains have some sort of wacky, phenomenal, utterly impossible to figure out process going on inside that produces consciousness. In other words, as a great writer once said, our brains produce consciousness in the way that our liver produces bile. And this is the consensus of the modern medical neuroanatomical world, that this is what happens. But it's the greatest delusion that mankind currently suffers under. When it's finally resolved, when the world at large finally realizes in consensus that this is not the case, and that what every spiritual master and every spiritual system has ever taught is actually the truth, then this material-minded consensus of what the brain is and what it does will be seen to be the greatest delusion in the history of mankind, by far the most limiting one. What's the other way of thinking about the brain? The brain is the receiver of consciousness. Now, there's some very heavy-duty neuroanatomists, brain scientists, physicists, great thinkers, cosmologists of all sorts that are beginning to fall in line with this way of thinking, because evidentially there's evidence being shown in a host of different ways that the brain receives consciousness. It doesn't produce it. Well, you might say, well, what's the big deal? What difference does that make in my life? I've got groceries to buy. I've got gas to buy, and gas is very expensive. What difference does it make? It makes the largest difference that you could ever imagine, because if we're operating under a general overarching delusion of who we think we are, every situation in our life would suffer and be tainted by that. There'd be a toxic delusion operating at the center of our being. Through meditation, when the delusion of thinking that our brain exudes or squirts out consciousness is finally resolved and the truth is revealed, one realizes that their brain, acting as a receiver or a filter of consciousness, can be adjusted, is highly and extraordinarily malleable. We can, through our observer within, we can begin to reshape how it is that our brain perceives, receives, filters consciousness. And this gives us the greatest power imaginable, the power of mind over reality. It allows us to be the great influencers of reality that we are, because if the generative scientists are correct and the brain squirts out consciousness, then that's a deterministic process. It's just atoms and molecules bumping into each other, and whatever it is that you think that you are is just a temporary spark of delusion, and all your hopes and dreams are just silly little phantasmagorisms of your own imagination. This is not true. The only proof I can give you is through meditation and the experience of what will happen to you if you stick with it and the delusion is washed away. Sooner or later, the collective will get it. You don't have to wait as an individual. You can wake up to the truth and realize this wonderful brain inside of your head is a tool that you've been blessed with as a being of consciousness. You can use it and shape it, and you can filter it, and you can expand it, and you can playfully play within it in ways so glorious that to miss it would be the great tragedy of life. Congratulations on being a meditator. It's well worth it. We'll continue the concept throughout the week. See ya.